everyone. Alan Menken of the
There are a lot of you. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that performance. It was
It was amazing.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's so sweet. Thank you. That was fun. What's up? Sorry.
I would love to ask you a question.
Good.
Yeah, yeah.
What initially drew you both to the story of Beauty and the Beast?
Right. Well, you go, because you were drawn to the story before the...
Well, I was drawn to the story by Disney. I mean, it was basically Howard Ashman and I were working on Little Mermaid. It hadn't been released yet, but people were very happy with it. And they said, how about with the Beauty and the Beast, we do that, you know, that we're interested in doing that next. Now, I have to say, Howard and I, actually, we had Aladdin, but Aladdin had to go back into development because we were a bit too edgy. And whatever, there was more development work to do on that. So Beauty and the Beast then came in and became the next thing we worked on together. And you know, as far as what drew me to it, beyond that, I mean, I gotta go back and credit Howard, who had some really brilliant. You know, when you look at the initial story and how you're going to turn it into an animated musical, then it was a matter of inventing the enchanted objects and inventing, you know, this huge ego for Gaston and his posse of nitwits who praise him. So, you know, simply because for the structure we needed to put in production numbers and comedy numbers, and so that, you know, it was all those brilliant ideas. And I got to say, you know, Howard was so instrumental at that.
I'm always curious, you must have, oh, sorry.
What drew
Oh,
you
no,
to it?
oh, I have to say, it was, you know, so I come in, there's this movie, this classic, perfect movie that already exists, and for me, more than anything, it was the score. The chance to really roll around in that music and to re-stage it, you know, do a kind of, you know, new version of it in a live-action format, but to especially those songs, and it just felt to me that was like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
When I heard that Bill was directing it, Richard Kraft, because I didn't know you. I knew the work you had done.
Right.
But Richard said, Bill is a major fan of musical theater.
Right.
He loves it. So this was, it was like, whew, because he knows the craft. He knows musicals. And so that was huge.
I'm just curious, sometimes you make a song and maybe it doesn't get into the movie. I know some new songs came into Beauty and the Beast. Were they brand new or did you?
They're brand new. Well, no, Days in the Sun, before Bill was on as director, this goes back to about 2008, there was discussions about a movie version of Beauty, and actually went as far as an early script. And when I was in London working on Sister Act, Tim was there, and I said, let's try, you know, working on a couple songs. So Days in the Sun, the genesis of that actually began back there as a sort of a lullaby moment. But once Bill came aboard, then that really got reworked, you know, to be a vehicle for so much backstory, and we're threading a lot of story through it. And the other songs, I would say, they were the song moments we decided at the beginning,
Exactly.
and those were the song moments we followed through on. You know, and the actual conception of the song was, yes, here they are. The actual execution was 2 years of beating those songs black and blue, and you know, we're going to reprise it here. We're going to put it in, you know, put a little bit of How Does a Moment Last Forever into the middle of Days in the Sun. We're going to take a Days in the Sun theme, and we're going to put it at the top as the aria, and just, you know, you have these threads, and you begin to then weave with them. But those, yeah, there was no. By the way, I never pull from a trunk, ever.
How do you guys work together so well throughout the process? You know, how does that process happen where the two of you really do kind of have to work together and know all the different moving parts?
Well, for me, I was intimidated, obviously, in our first meeting, because here I am, and I'm sort of talking about the first possible new song. And this is a legendary composer, but also it's a property that, as we keep saying, is perfect on its own. So it's like, okay, you're sort of going to tell me we need that, but Alan is the direct opposite of that. I think Alan, as a man of the theater, is somebody who craves the dialogue and the collaboration. I think that's what it's all about, and that became clear very, very soon.
Yeah.
We just started a conversation that went on for a couple of years then, right?
Yeah, and also we're both professionals. I mean, we both have done a lot of work. We know what's necessary in order to collaborate, and there are people who are new to musicals and will try to reinvent the wheel in one direction or another. But both of us have been through so much, and when you're pro, you basically arrive at the same place, kind of, because you know what's important and you know what needs to get done. And you also, by the way, know the necessity of process. And I know that for me, to go back to Beauty and the Beast on my own, no way I could do it. I had done it. It's all about other people coming in and collaborating. So for me, the director is the boss. And so it takes such a burden off of me. Now I'm able to be a catalyst, which is what I want to be. And, more than somebody driving the ship. Bill had the burden of actually driving the ship. So I don't know. That was that meandering answer, I guess. But.
Okay, so speaking of this, what was the hardest decision to make when we were filming the movie of scene music that you had to take out or that you had to put in?
Well, we didn't take anything out. That's the thing. You look at that animated film, and there's absolutely nothing missing. Now, I would say, I'm going to speak to you for a second, that there's a song that was originally conceived for the animated film, put into a reissue of the film, and put into the Broadway musical called Human Again, right? Which is a fantastic song, and I think one of your favorites. That was, an early conversation. It just felt, even a movie this scale, it took 2.5 years to do Be Our Guest, and Human Again is even bigger, in a way.
Absolutely.
And that just became something that we had to sacrifice, and so part of the feelings and what happens in Human Again got translated really into Days in the Sun, which has a very different feel.
And Human Again also, I gotta say, I thought it was, if I must say so much, because of Howard's, whatever, it's a brilliant song, it really is. But it was always problematic, always. It was a 9-minute sequence, going through so many sections and it's, you're basically watching the entire coming together of Belle and the Beast, and watching the objects react, and then going into a scene, and coming back to the song. So it was always a challenge to get it in. We ended up cutting it down to about 6 minutes by the time it got back into the animated movie, and then I think it got cut even a little further for the Broadway show. But I think in the future maybe we'll do a whole musical called Human Again and make up for it.
There you go.
That's great.
Can you talk about the challenges of balancing, the preservation of what the timeless classic is with
Sure.
the integration of, the new things you wanted to add?
I think, again, it was always about revealing more. It wasn't about reinventing, So it was like you bring it into the real world, and you start to ask questions that didn't matter in the animated film. How did Belle and Maurice wind up in this village? What happened to her mother? How did as you said, the prince become such a dissolute figure that he was worthy of being cursed? And as soon as you start asking those questions, and you start to bat around what the possible answers are, then you're making something different. But I think, for me, I could only ever really rely on my own kind of reverence for the original film, in knowing when you were changing something or going too far, and I hope never to cross that line.
I have another question. How did you know that Emma was your Belle?
Well, I suspected it, right? Just seeing her in Harry Potter, it seemed like that was a perfect kind of connection to a 21st century Belle. Then we met. I was shooting a movie called Mr. Holmes. We met for an hour, and the thing that I loved was how much she loved the original movie and how much she wanted to play the part. And she came with a whole pile of books, because I was late, because I was shooting, and she was in the middle of reading, so there she was, And then the only question really became, she's never sung professionally before, she needed to answer the question for herself too. She wanted to go off. It was a Christmas holiday, and she said, you know, you go off and get a script together. You can send me. We made a kind of handshake deal, and Emma's going to go off and make a tape and explore her voice. You know, and that was the thing. You know, that kind of scary moment. To me, it's more intimate than people taking their clothes off when you first hear somebody sing, even in a karaoke session, you know, and someone's like, oh my God, that's the sound that comes out of you, you know. And we've seen that a few times in movies too. But for her, her voice is so much it's so much a continuation of who she is and how she speaks. And there was clearly this kind of sweetness to it and clarity to it that made it seem like it was going to be a different Belle, but it was going to be a really satisfying one.
She was a little terrified.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there's no bones about it.
Yeah.
And we made sure she had her vocal coach. I had Michael Kozerin, my musical director. Bill was actually at the sessions. This is not necessarily the way it always is, but it was so helpful because she was, I think, really intimidated by me. I don't whack but simply because of me being the composer, I don't think she wanted to be that vulnerable in front of me. So I really hung back, you know, in the control room and in the back of the control room. And we had and also a guy named Matt Sullivan, who was a music supervisor, and just had to give Emma the space to just find her voice and work on it, and she did. And Dan was similar. He also was, you know, it was new for both of them.
Adapting a musical to film takes some work to
Yeah.
find balance.
Sure.
And here you had not only what was turned into a musical after the animated film, but the animated film that you had to keep in there as well.
Right.
How did you manage to incorporate all of those, and how is it different from just working straight off of a musical without an animated film prior to
Well, the thing is that it had been conceived as a movie first, you know, so there are certain principles about, like, you know, you can't just stop a movie for a ballad for 3 minutes, you know. Stories got to be told during the course of a movie number. That you can't do things you can do on stage. So that had already been figured out by Alan Howard in the creation of the original. So that was a useful thing to build on, you know. And I think for me, in terms of making it different, it's that you take the number Belle. And people can look at that and say, well, it's just the way it was in the animated. But actually, you know, in the course of that, we're telling some other new stories. You know, we're showing the fact that this is a village where only boys go to school, where girls do their laundry, and where, you know, the village lasses who are so into Gaston resent Belle because their mother has always doted more on Belle than her. Little glimpses, you know, characters who then turn out to play bigger roles, you know, in you know, one of them turns out to be Mr. Potts, one of them turns out to be somebody else's spouse, you know. So it was fun to be able to pack as much story into the songs, because that's I think you'd agree, that's when movie songs really work, you know.
And what Bill was doing, you know, you could compare it to a higher wire act. I mean, in a sense, every choice he makes is one that has to be weighed against the next choice he makes, and he says, and also what was there and people's expectations, and it's. I often say, you know, we have two brains. We have this brain and we have this brain, and a lot of times it's this brain, the gut brain, that goes, yeah, my gut tells me I think you've killed someone. Right. I need something there. Yeah. My gut tells me, as much as it makes sense, that's something wrong with that. Yeah. I mean, my job, you know, as I often liken what I do to being an architect. That we take a story and we create a structure so it can be musicalized, and then write these songs, and we create that structure. I'm not going to live in it. The actors are going to live in it. The director is going to be maybe like the contractor or the decorator, whatever analogy you want to give it. It can be lived in so many different ways. And I love that. I love when a song or a musical of mine is reconceived, so long as you don't, you know, take out numbers and just, you know, just throw a hand grenade into it. The structure is a structure, but then it's great when it gets reinvented, and that's it's been so well done with this movie.
Agreed.
And you've been in this career for so long. I mean,
too long.
Too long. But looking back now in time and seeing, I mean, Beauty and the Beast and now Beauty and the Beast again, like, what would you tell your old self? Like, knowing what you know now and where you are now.
What would I tell well, it's the stuff I've learned. I mean, one of the most important things I learned in my career was it's not about me. It's about the characters in the story. And don't ever fall in love with your own material. Let other people fall in love with it if they want. And if you have a note, the best way to address a note is to go, okay, and just do it because you're part of a thing that's larger than you. And the more, that's what's great about musical theater also. The more that you are recognizing that you're part of something that's bigger than you, and you are a part of that, and just stay in the process, that you can survive. I mean, it's the most tragic thing, and we've seen this, I'm sure, too. People who go, I wrote this wonderful musical. I don't know why it wasn't a hit. I got to try. I mean, maybe I got to keep working at it. I don't understand why they didn't like it. And I was just try your goddamn. Sorry. Don't throw it out. Push it aside and go on to something else. Write another musical and another and another. Just move on and don't get stuck, being the nursemaid to your own material.
Very well put.
So I grew up.
This is the last question, by the way.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
I grew up loving your music. I mean, it's helped me through hard times. Like my daughters and I, we dance to your songs like all the time.
Thank
So how has hearing songs, or how has hearing stories of how your music has impacted other people? How's that impacted you?
It's unreal. It's unreal. It gives me, frankly, more of a sense of what we think of as a collective consciousness, that we're all part of a collective consciousness, because, we as artists are conduits for emotion and for, things, they really do come through us. I mean, God knows we shape them, and so I just feel very blessed, honestly, so blessed that I'm a vehicle for that. And I sometimes, that's amazing and wonderful, because, basically I was a kid that liked to practice piano, and I was a nervous kid with an ulcer, and I just was a dreamer, and then somehow I found that writing songs was really, composing just was where my brain would settle, and I just did it and did it and did it and did it, and now it has an impact on people like that, and that's, just go, I'm just living my life, and it's had that effect, and wow.
Great.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
If you guys would be so kind to take a